Some stunning new data from the Washington Post about just how much Americans owe in back rent, despite the fact that we may have an eviction moratorium. We do not have rent forbearance. From the Washington Post, Heather Long, 12 million renters will owe $5,800 in back rent and utilities by early January. That is absolutely stunning. And you can actually see that this is about 21. The numbers of those behind on the rent are very high for actually families with children. 21% falling behind on rent are families of people of color. They can actually have this down by the database on race, and more, of course, disproportionately impacts many of those. But we're talking here about 1.3 million households, as well as an average of $5,400 in debt on rent and utilities after these people have already lost jobs and families' income plunge, which is what I've been trying to talk about here from the very beginning. Right. Eviction moratorium is great. But $6,000 is actually a lot of money for a lot of people. What are they going to do, especially if they are already out of work and there's no extra unemployment insurance? That's a lifetime of debt. Once it gets to $10,000, it's a lifetime. It will take them years in order to crawl out of that hole. And we know this eviction moratorium is not going to last forever. So people are going to get kicked out of their houses. Right after Christmas. They're not going to have extra unemployment. Then there's no stimulus. I mean, this is insanity, total insanity. 12 million people who are behind 5,400. And each one of those people represents a household of children, of husbands, grandparents, and so much more. It's horrible.
It is. Yeah. It's hard to really wrap your head around. And we know what that spiral looks like, too. Once you lose your housing, then everything becomes unstable. And for children, they're impacted the most from having to face long-term housing instability. I mean, we saw this out of course, 2008 crisis, when you had so many foreclosures, so many people losing their stable dwelling, not to mention whatever wealth they had built up in that domicile. We are facing now like a 2008 level housing crash on top of everything else that we're dealing with. And the other piece of this that just bothers me so much, and I will never get over, is all of this is entirely predictable. Yeah. What did we say the day that we had an eviction moratorium in place? This is great. It gives people a little bit of breathing room, but you know what? That bill is going to come due and we're going to push people off of a cliff. Well, that cliff is weeks away now. And guess what? Nothing is happening. No one here cares to really get it together to try to save you, or I should say very few, because there are a couple, but very, very few, and certainly not enough to actually get it done. Just to put a little bit of human face on what we're looking at right here, the New York Times had a story about a neighborhood in the Bronx called West Farms. It's already, a working class, working poor kind of neighborhood, a lot of affordable housing. And this is one of the hardest hit places in the entire country. The unemployment rate has spiked up to 25% in this neighborhood. Bless you.
Thank you.
And we have stories of people who, of course, were already living precariously, right? Already scraping it together, but getting by with hopes and dreams and building little savings so that they could, in one instance, this is Melissa Mercedes. She has a daughter. She's been staying with her mother in West Farms. She had carefully saved, she says, about $3,000 by living frugally. She rarely went out, almost never bought herself new clothes. Then the pandemic came, closed non-essential businesses in March. She lost her job as a store detective at Macy's and her $550 weekly paycheck. Her savings were soon gone too. And she says, I cry about it because I've been trying to get my own place. Here she is doing everything she can to build a life for her and her daughter and doing it all right. And not having any sort of luxuries, not doing anything other than just living frugally and trying to make it, and she's totally hosed. And you just read story after story after story exactly like this.
And the part that gets me is I already know what's going to happen. Is these people are not going to get bailed out in order to pay their rent. What's going to happen is they're going to be unable to pay their rent, and commercial businesses and landlords are going to fail. And then Congress is going to say, you can't let these landlords go out of business. So they're going to get bailed out. Yeah. So the real estate companies and the major landlords and all those shiny big office buildings, they're the ones who will eventually, their owners will get bailed out by the government.
Yes.
But the people who owe the rent, Nothing. They're going to be on the hook for the rest of their lives.
Because this is one of the things that was really exposed during the 2008 financial crisis is all of these individual renters, individual homeowners, all of that is financialized.
Yes.
So when you have a mass epidemic of millions of people unable to make their mortgage payments or pay their rent, that goes all the way up to the top, to the Wall Street banks. And then all of a sudden,
they bundle it.
And they're the only ones that these people listen to or care about. So yeah, they're going to, if they end up in trouble, they're going to get their bailout. You know, the higher you are in the food chain, the more likely you are to ultimately get help. Is there going to be any help for Melissa Mercedes? No, probably not.
Absolutely not.
All right, Marianne, more rising for you after this.